بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها وقال الإنسان ما لها يومئذ تحدث أخبارها بأن ربك أوحى لها يومئذ يصدر الناس أشتاتا ليروا أعمالهم فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره.
رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. فالحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ثم أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh once again. Today, inshallah, we attempt to study the 99th surah of the Mus'haf order, Surah Zalzala, also called Zilzal. This surah is part of a group of surahs. I'd like to say something about that in the very beginning. It seems to be the case that towards the end of the Quran, there are a number of occasions where surahs occur in groups of four. Instead of even just being pairs of surahs, they occur in groups of four. And this is one of those occasions. So this surah, Surah Zalzala, Al-Adiyat after it, Al-Qari'ah after that, Al-Takathur after that, are kind of a group of four. And they have an interesting relationship with each other. This surah is only and only talking about the day of resurrection, Judgment Day, and how it's going to, what some of the events that are going to take place. There is no other message inside of this surah. If you skip one surah after it, Al-Qari'ah, it's exactly the same thing. It's once again a surah dedicated only and exclusively to the subject of Judgment Day, resurrection. And these two surahs in their style and in their subject matter are very close to each other, and they even complete one another. There are some things that are open-ended in this surah that are closed in that surah. So they kind of go hand in hand. It's not the surah right after this one, skip one and it's one after that. So this 99th surah and then the 101st surah. Similarly, the surah right after this one, وَالْعَادِيَاتِ ضَبْحًا, that's a surah focused on greed. It actually highlights, وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. The central message of that surah is that human beings are obsessed with the want of more and more and more. Similarly, the 102nd surah, At-Takathur, is again, أَلْهَاكُمُ التَّكَاثُرُ. It's again about greed. So a surah about Judgment Day, followed by a surah about greed, followed by another surah about Judgment Day, followed by another surah about greed. That's sort of the organizational sequence of these four surahs. As if Allah Azza wa Jalla is describing that the remedy for greed is remembrance of the Day of Judgment. That's kind of the formula that's being depicted here and really beautifully articulated. It's a brief surah. I don't think it'll take us that long to go through the meanings and the message of the surah, but let's begin inshallah ta'ala. إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. When the earth is rattled as it is meant to be rattled. When the earth is rattled, shaken, when the earth has been given quakes the way that it's always meant to have been given quakes. The first word here, an important word, is zalzala. And zalzala in Arabic is al-harakatul anifa wal-ittirab al-shadid. It's a violent movement or a great or intense disturbance. They use the verb as in zalzala al-ibila saqaha bi'unufin hatta yattaribu sayruha. They use it for when somebody's being really rough with a camel and they keep beating up their camel. And they beat it so much, of course, you kind of sometimes hit the animal to mush the animal, to make it go forward or whatever, or you use a whip or something. But if someone does it so much that the camel can't even walk straight anymore, it starts tripping on itself because of the kind of beating that it's taken. That actually means the owner has overdone it, has tortured the animal too much, and that's actually called zalzala al-ibil. That it can't even walk straight anymore, and it's got a disturbed movement. The word here used in the past tense suggests that this is زِلْزَالُهَا الشَّدِيدُ الَّذِي لَيْسَ بَعْدَهُ زِلْزَالٌ. This is going to be the one earthquake after which there will be no other earthquake. In other words, there have been earthquakes before, there have been shakings of the earth and rattlings before, but this one is the one to end them all. And that's the idea of زِلْزَالَهَا at the end, the maf'ul mutlaq at the end. Abi Hayyan, in his tafsir, قول أبي حيان إذ المعنى الزلزال الذي تستحقه ويقتضيه جرمها وعظمها. What that means is, normally in Arabic you say إذا زلزلت الأرض, when the earth is shaken. Then if you want to add some more emphatic note to it, you say إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالا. That's not what the surah says. And that would mean the earth is completely shaken up. Zilzalan would add an intensity to the meaning. But the ayah says, إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. It adds yet another pronoun, ha, which is unusual. Okay, like you have, for example, إِذَا دُكَّتِ الْأَرْضُ دَكًّا dakkan, not dakkaha, it's dakkan. But this time it's إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. That ha at the end actually means it's the earthquake that was always meant to happen. It's been, you can say, it's been hiding inside of the earth, waiting to come out all this time, and it finally gets to do so. This is actually furthering and elaborating what's already been described as in وَأَذِنَتْ مَا, وَأَلْقَتْ مَا فِيهَا وَتَخَلَّتْ وَأَذِنَتْ لِرَبِّهَا وَحُقَّتْ. Allah will give the earth permission, we read before. And it will finally give out what it's been holding inside as it's had the right to do so. Meaning it was well deserved that it finally let go. It's not like Allah will cause a disturbance on the earth and otherwise it was calm and all of a sudden it got disturbed. It's actually quite the opposite. The earth wants to unleash, it wants to go crazy, if you will. It wants to have a violent earthquake. And the only one stopping it from happening is actually Allah letting it, keeping it calm. ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس ليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا. Surah Al-Rum, Allah describes that corruption comes out and the earth sometimes has earthquakes, floods and hurricanes and natural disasters because of some of the sins of people. Judgment Day is when the earth gets to react to all of the sins of people. Like the other natural disasters are a result of some sins. But this is going to be all sins combined mutually, and Allah will finally give it permission to react as it's been wanting to react. Okay, this is again, this theme of nature being withheld is also used when Allah describes winds. And Allah describes winds like a wild horse, that when you tame a horse, you put a saddle on the horse. And you domesticate the horse and now it's under your control. But if you have a wild horse, you don't have a saddle. So if you're riding a wild horse, the only thing you can hold on to is its hair. And if you want it to stop, you're going to yank on its hair. And then it's going to calm down a little bit. But if you let go of its hair, it's going to go crazy. And Allah describes the winds as similar to a wild horse whose hair has been let go. وَالْمُرْسَلَاتِ عُرْفًا. Those that have been released, whose hair has been released. In other words, it's moving like a wild horse, like tornado winds and things like that. That image also reinforces the same idea. And what's that idea? The earth, nature, the calm breeze that we feel, the fact that we can walk on this earth without slipping and falling, and buildings aren't shaking to their core and their foundation and falling apart. The fact that all of that is not happening is not the norm. We think of this as the normal, and we think of the natural disaster as an unusual case. Allah is describing in the Quran, that's actually the normal. And what you're experiencing every day is an unusual mercy from Allah. Unusually, He's keeping things normal. And a time will come where He will decide that He will let the earth have what it's wanted all along, to shake the way it's been wanting to shake. And so zilzalaha, as it was always meant to shake. When the earth is rattled, as it was always meant to be rattled. تَكْرَارُ الْأَرْضِ مَقْصُودٌ لِتَرْسِيخِ الْيَقِينِ وَلِقْنَاعِ النَّفْسِ. If you notice, the next ayah also says ard again. وَأَخْرَجَتِ الْأَرْضُ أَثْقَالَهَا. Even though when a noun is mentioned, it's only customary to mention it second time as a pronoun. So you could get away with وَأَخْرَجَتْ أَثْقَالَهَا. It brought out its burdens. The next ayah is, first ayah is, it shakes the way it was always meant to shake, and the time when it brings out its burdens, its loads. But instead of saying its loads, Allah repeats the word earth. And the earth, when it brings out its loads, its heavy burdens. So the repeat of the word earth is to actually remind the believer as they're listening to this ayah, to visualize. Do you realize I'm talking about the same earth you're walking about? This earth is going to give out its loads. The earth, again, is going to give out its loads. So twice the earth is mentioned like that in order to kind of get it in your head. It's not something casual or normal that's being talked about. فمن الأول أثقلت المرأة فهي مثقل ثقل حملها في بطنها. ثقل in Arabic is actually used for the late stages of pregnancy. So they say about a woman, she has ثقل when her baby is basically about to come out. It's become harder for her to walk, it could go any day, and she's not able to bear the burden of it, and it's time that she let go of the child. So this word used for the earth is actually kind of describing the earth as pregnant. And it wants to give birth. What is it pregnant with? It's pregnant with people that are living inside of it, that have been buried inside of it. Just like a child is inside the mother, we are inside the earth. and their sins and their deeds that happened on top of the earth. It's been holding those secrets all along. If nobody else was witness to what happened on the earth, the ground itself was witness. The ground saw where you went, what you said, what you did. It was listening to all of it. And those secrets died with you, and your secrets, your deeds, got buried inside. And that pregnancy of the earth with all of us and our deeds, it's had enough. It's time for it to give birth. And that's the image before, وَأَلْقَتْ مَا فِيهَا وَتَخَلَّتْ. It releases what's inside of it, and it's finally freed, emptied out. Like it couldn't wait to let go. And so Allah says, وَأَخْرَجَتِ الْأَرْضُ أَثْقَالَهَا. It'll finally let go of all of its pregnancies in a sense. All of its loads that have been inside. In a figurative sense, ithqal is also used. أَثْقَلَهُ الْهَمُّ وَالدَّيْنُ. They use it for when something is someone's overwhelmed. Like if depression or sadness has overwhelmed somebody, its weight is too much on them. Or if a loan, money you owe somebody has put so much burden on you, like it's overwhelming you. That's also when ithqal is used in a figurative sense, not just in the literal sense. So in a sense, the earth will let go of what has been overwhelming it. The things that have been making the earth itself sad. تَحْمِلُ أَثْقَالَكُمْ إِلَى بَلَدٍ لَمْ يَكُونُوا بَالِغِيهِ إِلَى شِقِّ الْأَنفُسِ. Allah Azza wa Jal describes in another ayah in Surah Al-An'am, same word athqal, it's only used 3 times in the Quran. It's used for heavy burdens, or you can say carriage, or materials that you have to check in, or cargo that you couldn't carry yourselves. You need animals to carry it. You couldn't have brought it somewhere. In other words, athqal is not used for a light burden. It's used for very, very heavy cargo burdens. Almost describing that you and I maybe weigh a certain number of pounds or kilograms, but our deeds are athqal. They're like mountains. They're huge and heavy burdens that have been being held within the earth. لا يحملن أثقالهم وأثقالا مع أثقالهم. Surah Al-Ankabut, Allah uses the same word again. And He uses it to describe how there are people who encourage you to do sin, and they say, don't worry about it. If you get caught with Allah, you can just tell Allah, I told you to do it. And Allah says, no, they will absolutely carry their own heavy loads, and on top of that, they will carry a load in addition to their own. وَأَثْقَالًا مَعَ أَثْقَالِهِمْ وَلَا يُسْأَلُونَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ عَمَّا كَانُوا يَفْتَرُونَ. And they will be questioned about the things they made up. Who are you to carry anybody else's burdens? And you want that invitation? Allah says, fine, I will make you carry your own and other people's too, because you wanted it that way. He'll make them eat those words, essentially. وَالْأَرْضِ إِذَا تُخْرِجُ أَثْقَالَهَا تَفْعَلُ ذَلِكَ كَالْمَدْفُوعَ بِرَغْبَةِ التَّخَفُّفِ. This is Bint Shati in her brilliant commentary. The earth, when it wants to release its burdens, is doing so as something that has been compelled to do so out of the desire to finally be light again. مِنْ هَذَا الَّذِي يُثْقِلُهَا. Lightened away from this thing that's been overwhelming it. عِنْدَمَا حَانَ الْأَوَانِ. When the time has come where it can't take anymore. Meaning the time for delivery of the child. Like the mother can't hold it in anymore. All she wants now is to be done with this burden. وَإِذَا الْأَرْضُ مُدَّتْ. When the earth is stretched, just like the body of a mother is stretched. وَأَلْقَتْ مَا فِيهَا وَتَخَلَّتْ. And it gives out and is finally relieved. وَقَالَ الْإِنسَانُ مَا لَهَا. Then the third scene of this ayah is the human being will cry out, what is wrong with it? The human being will say, what is wrong with the earth? There's a long discussion about whether this ayah is referring to the disbeliever who says, what's wrong with the earth? Because the believers will know this is Judgment Day, so they're not going to have that question. So a lot of mufassirun went in the direction of saying the word insan here refers to kafir. I'm more inclined towards the interpretation of Bint Shati among others, rahimahullah, that this is actually referring to all human beings. And she gave a really interesting set of evidences, but one of them I'll quote to you is from Surah Al-Hajj. She argues, Ya ayyuhan nas ittaqu rabbakum inna zalzalata sa'ati shay'un azim. Allah says in Surah Al-Hajj, humanity, be conscious of your master. The zalzala, the earthquake of the hour, same word, zilzal, right? The earthquake of the hour is a massive thing. يَوْمَ تَرَوْنَهَا تَذْهَلُ كُلُّ مُرْضِعَةٍ عَمَّا أَرْضَعَتْ وَتَضَعُ كُلُّ ذَاتِ حَمْلٍ حَمْلَهَا وَتَرَى النَّاسَ سُكَارَى وَمَا هُمْ بِسُكَارَى. The day on which you will see every mother who bore a child drop her child, and everyone who had a load or pregnancy drop her load. Everyone, not every disbeliever, everyone. So she uses the word everyone in that ayah to say, look, Allah is not saying that the day of judgment is going to be scary for disbelievers, but it'll be just fine for believers. The early events of Judgment Day are horrifying for all of humanity. They are a shock for all of humanity. And that's why over and over again, the Quran will not say this kind of shock is something that disbelievers will experience. He'll use insan or nas for that experience. The early parts of that will be for all humanity. When we are, whether or not we're safe on Judgment Day or not, it's not like there are some patches of the earth that are not shaking. It's not like when you and I come out of our graves that we are in some secure booth and everybody else is shaking. We're going to be shaking too. We're going to be rattled too. So it's not, and this is not a punishment, but this is just an experience we have to go through. It just has to happen. This is part of, just like kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut. You and I have to taste death, believe it or not. There are some difficult experiences in life that all of us must experience, and this is one of them. This is just a part of our life. It's inevitable, and it will happen, and there's no avoiding it. And so Allah says, وَقَالَ الْإِنسَانُ مَا لَهَا. The human being will cry out then, what is wrong with it? What's wrong with the earth? وَيَوْمَئِذٍ تُحَدِّثُ أَخْبَارَهَا. Now we switch to the second style of the surah. While all of that is happening, and while you would wonder, why is a human being going to cry out, what is wrong with it? When on that day all of this happens, you will notice one more thing, تُحَدِّثُ أَخْبَارَهَا. As if the shaking of the earth, and things coming, the dead coming out of the earth, secrets coming out of the earth, its treasures coming out. People say the heavy loads, meaning the buried treasures and things that have been inside are all coming out. The earth is basically popping open everywhere, unleashing everywhere. But in the middle of all of that, the biggest tragedy of all that human beings will say, this is the worst of all of it, is actually this ayah, يَوْمَئِذٍ تُحَدِّثُ أَخْبَارَهَا. The day on which it will speak of all of its events. The day on which the earth itself will start talking about everything that happened on it. تُحَدِّثُ أَخْبَارَهَا. So tuhaddith means it'll speak, and it'll speak to others, meaning it'll elaborate and articulate and clearly speak about all the events that took place, meaning the crimes that happened here, the wars that happened here, the things that were said on this earth. Everything that happened, it was witness to it, and it now wants to testify. Meaning the earliest testimony on the Day of Judgment is the testimony of the earth itself. SubhanAllah, it's a scary thought. Like somebody who's about to commit a crime, they're like, okay, nobody there. Except nobody looks down and says, oh wait, the earth is still there. The earth itself is going to testify. Every grain of it will testify. Every grain of sand will testify. SubhanAllah. This is actually an extension of, it's bad enough that the earth will testify. Eventually our own bodies will testify. أَنْتَقَنَا الَّذِي أَنْتَقَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. Our body parts will say, the one who gave everything the power to speak has given us the power to speak today too. That's going to happen too. But right now we're talking about the earth. So along those lines, there are a few interesting narrations. Some of them not as authentic, but they still seem to corroborate the message of the ayah. So I'll share them with you. One is from the Sunan of Ibn Majah. تَقُولُ الْأَرْضُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يَا رَبِّ هَذَا مَا اسْتَوْدَعَتْنِي. On the day of resurrection, the earth will cry out, Master, meaning Allah, this is what I've been keeping inside. The earth will actually speak. This is what I've been keeping inside, or what kept me loaded up. وعن ابن مسعود تحدث الأرض بقيام الساعة. Ibn Mas'ud narrates in another narration that when the earth speaks, when the hour is established, إذ قال الإنسان ما لها. When the human being cries out, what is wrong with the earth? Why is it acting like this? It's actually in response to that the earth will speak. فَتُخْبِرُ أَنَّ أَمْرَ الدُّنْيَا قَدْ انْقَضَى. So the earth will say, the way that the world used to work is done now. وَأَنَّ أَمْرَ الْآخِرَةِ قَدْ أَتَى. And the way the next life works has now arrived. This is the new life. The way the earth used to operate, those days are gone. This is the new system now. The system of the akhirah has now been established. That will be the earth's response to human beings. Will say, what's wrong with you? And it'll say basically, nothing's wrong. This is the new order. This is the new order, the order of the akhirah that has now arrived. فَيَكُونُ ذَلِكَ جَوَابًا لَهُمْ عَنْ سُؤَالِهِمْ. Hey. That is going to be the answer to their question. Abu Hayyan says, الظاهر أنه حديث وكلام حقيقة. Ibn Abu Hayyan also says that this seems to be the case, that Allah is not just saying the earth will speak as in its earthquakes and its rattling is its speaking, is in a matter of saying, like the earth has spoken by its earthquakes, by its reactions. He's saying no, that's like a figurative interpretation. He's saying it seems from the ayah that the earth will actually speak explicitly. It will be given a voice. It will actually testify. And it's brought to life in a way that we didn't know about before. There's another Hasan narration, which is also considered Hasan Sahih but Gharib narration. This is found in a Tirmidhi. It's attributed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, أنه قرأ هذه الآية. He read this ayah about the human beings will say what's wrong with it, and it will speak out whatever events it witnessed. قال أتدرون ما أخبارها. He said, do you know what events it's going to talk about? When he recited the ayah and then asked the companions, do you know what it's going to talk about? قالوا الله ورسوله أعلم. They responded, Allah and His Messenger know better. فقال إن أخبارها أن تشهد على كل عبد أو أمة بما عمل على ظهرها تقول عمل كذا يوم كذا وكذا فهذه أخبارها. So Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this narration, which is somewhat questionable in authenticity, but in its meaning it seems to be 100% in line with the ayah, says that on that day the earth will testify against every slave, male and female, about whatever they did on the back of this earth, meaning on the surface of this earth, and it will say he did this on that day, and he did this and this and this on that day, and this will be its events. This is how it will speak. It will point out people and talk about what they had done. This idea is not so far-fetched that Allah will make the earth speak, because Allah makes hell speak on Judgment Day. فَتَقُولُوا هَلْ مِن مَزِيدٍ. Hellfire says, is there any more I can feed on? تَدْعُوا مَنْ أَدْبَرَ وَتَوَلَّى. Hell will call people that turn its back and run away from it. Hey, where are you going? Literally, that's what's going to be said on Judgment Day. تَدْعُوا مَنْ أَدْبَرَ وَتَوَلَّى سَمِعُوا لَهَا تَغَيُّظًا وَزَفِيرًا. Hell, people will hear from it, its roar and its snarl, like the snarling of a lion. They'll hear that violent breathing of hell. So there are several, other ghaibiyat, things of the unseen that are going to be given speech on Judgment Day, and the earth is obviously included among them. بِأَنَّ رَبَّكَ أَوْحَى لَهَا. And all of that will happen. When the human being says, what is wrong with it? And it starts talking about whatever happened on it, where did it get this ability? It is because, بِأَنَّ, or on account of the fact that, رَبَّكَ أَوْحَى لَهَا, that its master, in fact, has inspired it to do so. أَوْحَى لَهَا. And this is kind of a perplexing ayah because of grammar, because all over the Quran, everywhere else actually in the Quran, the word wahi is used quite often. And never has it been used with a lam. It's always been used with ila. So أوحى ربك إلى النحل أوحينا إليك. Okay? So whenever iha is used or wahi is used, it comes with ila. But here, instead of saying بِأَنَّ رَبَّكَ أَوْحَى إِلَيْهَا, Allah says بِأَنَّ رَبَّكَ أَوْحَى لَهَا. The lam is used. That has two implications. One of them is tadmeen. Tadmeen means, this is again, for now, for the next minute or so, only relevant for Arabic students, but I'll make that simple English at the end of that, okay? What happens is you have two verbs, and one of them, the verb of one and the preposition of the other is used. And by doing so, both of them are combined. In other words, not only did Allah inspire it, but it also gave it permission. Or He inspired it and spoke, أوحى إليها وقال لها, أو أوحى إليها وأذن لها, like that. So it combines the verb of one and the preposition of the other, kind of a cross-pollination, and you get the meanings of both in one. So that's called tadmeen. In other words, Allah said less but said more by using this expression أوحى لها. So He's saying He inspired the earth and spoke to the earth, and that's why it's speaking now. Or He inspired the earth and finally gave it permission to speak, and now it's speaking now. There's another implication of lam. They say in grammar, they say al-lamu wa ila ukhtan, that they're two sisters. Lam and ila are two sisters. They're very close in meaning. أوحى لها أي ألهمها وعرفها بأن تحدث أخبارها. That Allah inspired it and introduced it to the ability that it can speak on its own. وَالْإِحَاءُ لِلْأَرْضِ بِاللَّامِ. This is the point, that's the next point. وَالْإِحَاءُ لِلْأَرْضِ بِاللَّامِ لِلْمُبَاشَرَةِ وَسِرُّ قُوَّتِهِ فِي هذه التلقائية المباشرة على وجه التسخير. ومن هنا كان إيثار التعدية باللام لما في معنى اللام من اختصاص وإلصاق وصيرورة وتقوية الإيصال. All of what that means is, instead of using ila, like Allah inspired or sent inspiration to the earth, the ila actually suggests some level of distance. But when you say lam, that actually removes distance and connects two things together. Notice in the surah, it's not angels coming and executing, or the armies of angels. Allah is saying, Allah Himself, أَنَّ رَبَّكَ أُوحَى لَهَا. Right? And the earth itself is speaking and taking permission, and it's not taking permission or instruction from angels, it's speaking directly with Allah. And Allah is talking directly to it. And so there's no gap left between Allah and the compliance of the earth, and the two have been brought close, almost in the sense of وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا, the arrival of Allah Himself, subhanahu wa ta'ala, on that day, and Him speaking directly to the earth. So the direct connection between Allah and the earth has been established by the lam, أَوْحَى لَهَا. And so Allah has inspired the earth to speak on that day, and it's inspired it to testify. يَوْمَئِذٍ يَصْدُرُ النَّاسِ. And now that this testimony has begun, then the next scene that is described is يَوْمَئِذٍ يَصْدُرُ النَّاسِ, the day on which people are going to be, it says spread out, but sadara in Arabic, really interesting word. It's used for, it's the opposite of warada. Warada is actually when you're in the desert and you're looking for water. And of course, if you're in the desert looking for water and you find it, like فَلَمَّا وَرَدَ مَاءَ مَدْيَنَ, you get your water and then you move on. You don't stay at the water, you get whatever you need and then you carry on with your journey. And the idea of getting water and moving on is sadara. That's why you bring the animals to drink and then you take them on their way. And this is why even in the story of Musa alayhi salam, لَا نَسْقِي حَتَّى يُصْدِرَ الرِّعَاء وَأَبُونَا شَيْخٌ كَبِيرٌ. We're not going to feed our animals, give our animals water until we've replenished them and they can move on. And our dad is too old to do the job, we have to do it ourselves. That's what those women told Musa alayhi salam. Same word was used, yustir. Here the mujarrad form, yasturun nas is used. What does it mean? It actually means when people move on from the watershed. Bear with me, that sounds complicated. When people move on from the watershed, Allah is describing this entire life that we lived like you were on a journey in the desert, a long journey, and there was a brief stop by some water, and you had a little bit to replenish yourself, and then the journey goes on. As if to describe thousands of years, even more, countless years before you and I came to this earth, Allah had already created us. Our ruh already existed. All of them already existed since the time of Adam alayhi salam. We have been around a very long time. And then Allah took our ruh, put it inside our mother, and let us have a little bit of rizq, a little bit of water, for a little while on this earth. This was just a pit stop. And then it's time to move on. Because the next station, the journey goes on. And so yasdurun nas is actually, people are done with this temporary stop, and now it's time for them to move on. But once they move on, in this temporary stop, they all shared the planet. They all shared neighborhoods. They all shared family even. Believer and disbeliever was in the same family. Remember in the previous surah we saw that people would not have been munfakkeen, wouldn't have been separated until al-bayyinah came. Now Allah says, as people will move on from this journey, now they won't be together anymore, ashtatan. They're going to be broken up into groups. Broken up into several groups heading in several different directions. This is picking up from a theme that we've already read. Inna sa'yakum lashatta. Same word again. Your efforts go in different directions. And picking up from that, depending on the kinds of efforts your life was made up of, that's the group you'll belong to heading in a different direction based on your actions. And just like that, in that surah, Inna sa'yakum lashatta, efforts and diversity was together. Here, ashtat comes with a'mal. Just like sa'i and shatta and ashtat and a'mal. So ashtatan liyuraw a'malahum, so they may be shown their deeds. People will move on from the watershed, people will pass along from this life, because this is over, the earth is telling you that time is done, there's no more rizq here, now the only rizq left is that of the akhirah, and now when you go forward, you are going to be broken up into varieties of groups, so you may be shown your deeds. لِيُرَوْا أَعْمَالَهُم. You know what that suggests? That suggests that people are going to be categorized not by race, they're not going to be categorized by height or color or language, they're going to be categorized by deeds. You know, the murderer from here and the murderer from Australia and the murderer from Bangladesh or wherever else, all bunched together. They're all in one place. The musalli, the faster, the giver of charity, the forgiver, wherever they were from, whatever generation they were from, whatever region they were from, whatever society they were from, whatever prophet they were from, bunched together by a category of deed. لِيُرَوْا أَعْمَالَهُم. That's one kind of categorization. Then we'll find other categorization. يَوْمَ نَدْعُو كُلُّ أُنَاسٍ بِإِمَامِهِمْ. The day on which we call everybody by their leaders. Meaning, who did they follow? Who did they follow? Meaning by their prophets or their false gods and everything else. So there are multiple kinds of categorizations on Judgment Day that have been identified. Perhaps referring to different stages of Judgment Day. But in any case, now Allah says, people will have moved on and they'll be broken up into groups so they may be shown their deeds. She says, Ibn Tashati says, ثُمَّ لَا أَجِدُ مَا يُفَسِّرُ بِهِ آيَةَ الزَّلْزَلَةِ إِلَّا نَقِيدَ الْوَرْدِ لِأَنَّ مَا فِي رَبْطِهِمَا سِرُّ الدَّلَالَةِ الْمُوحِيَةِ بِأَنَّ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا لَيْسَتْ بِدَارِ مَقَامٍ. This is simple. Like the fact that the word yasdur was used is only there to describe it as the opposite of warada, to stop for water, actually to move on from the water, because this world was never a place we were meant to stay forever. And so we come to the concluding ayat of this remarkable surah, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ. And so then whoever may have done the equivalent in weight, mithqal in Arabic is the equivalent of the weight of something. Like this is mithqal of that, means this one weighs as much as that. When you compare two things, that's mithqal. Okay, mithqal is a unit of measure, like you can say nowadays a gram, or a milligram, or a kilogram, or a pound. Those are all mithqal, actually, in Old Arabic. A means by which weight is measured, a standard by which weight is measured. So Allah says, whoever may have done the worth of a dharra, the weight, I won't translate dharra yet, of good, will see it. If you have done, and ya'mal actually means consciously done. Amal includes niyyah in it, fi'l doesn't. Whoever consciously did an act of good, and meant to do something good, even if it's the worth of what Allah calls a dharra. Now what is dharra? A dhar ma yura fi shu'a'i shams min al-haba. Dhar is if you're sitting by a window on a sunny day and you see little fibers of dust flying around. One of those is called a dhar. And what does that weigh? Allah says the equivalent of the weight of that of a good deed a human being will see. That is almost impossible to see to begin with. Forget weigh. Forget value. In other words, human beings will be shocked on that day that Allah counted the good deeds that they never even thought about. It didn't even occur to them that that was a good deed. And Allah will have counted it. And they will see it. This is the second time in the surah you're talking about the shock of the human being. The first shock of the human being was when the earth was shaking up and the human being was saying, what is wrong with this? What's going on with the earth? Malaha. The second time the human being is shocked is when he sees or she sees a speck, like a flying bit of dust. And by the way, where does dust come from? The earth. It rises from the earth. So you saw in the beginning of the surah, the earth is giving up its heavy burdens. And now by the end, not only are the heavy burdens a means of consequence, by the end of it, every speck is of consequence. And that's why the two times the word thiql was used. Athqal was for the heavy loads of the earth. In the beginning, وَأَخْرَجَتِ الْأَرْضُ أَثْقَالَهَا, and now the same root origin again, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ. And it's a mercy from Allah Azza wa Jal. When we think of Judgment Day, we think of our bad deeds first. And in the surah, everything is so scary, but by the time he gets to the end, he says, before I tell you about your bad deeds, let me tell you first, none of your good deeds are going to be wasted away. There's not a good deed that will not go on record. It will be counted and it will be measured. Even if it's so small that it was impossible to measure in this world. Now herein lies the question. How is something impossible to measure in this world, but is so valuable on Judgment Day, or of any value on Judgment Day? You see, the thing is, when the Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, actions are entirely dependent on their intentions. That is not how the world works. That is only how Islam works. That's not how the real world, or this worldly life, that's not how it works. If somebody does a great job, or does everything they needed to market the product, to sell the product, and they made no sales. They made no sales. Are they going to keep their job or going to lose their job? They're going to lose their job. You didn't get the results. And they go to their boss and say, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Actions are based, I intended to make the sales. And وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. Every person should get rewarded according to their intention. My intention was to make more sales than have ever been made in history. Yes, I did make a single sale, but since I should be rewarded based on my intentions, I need a bonus. That is not how the world works. The world works on results. What impact did you have? How much sales did you make? How many audience did you have? How many people attended the program? How much money did you raise? How many people did you feed? Like a charitable organization, its success is going to be some bar graphs. What you can measure. What you can see. But somebody living in some apartment somewhere and he's helping their neighbor out or whatever, that's not on a chart anywhere. You understand? The same way, there's a fundraiser and they say, who's going to give 50,000? And nobody raises their hand because it's awkward. But some guy writes a check for 50,000. And by the end of it, when the fundraiser is like already over, people are dying, they're falling off in their chairs, and the guy's not letting go, and he says, okay, who's going to give $5? Right? And when somebody says $5, the takbir is much lower. Like, it's not like takbir! It's not like that anymore. I was like, Allah, like that. But what do you know? That there's someone in the audience who only had $5.50. And they gave $5. You don't know that. In this world, it only added to the balance by $5. But in the next world, that $5 may be worth way more than anybody in this world could ever have imagined. The scales of that day are different because they are based on the level of sacrifice you made, the level of difficulty you went through, the level of difficulty I had to go through. So that day, it may be that the 50,000 was worth nothing, or worth less than the 50 cents on the other side, or the quarter on the other side. It may be that case. So this is mithqala dharratin. What you thought was nothing. Nobody else thought it was significant. Your contribution, who would even know? Who would even care? Today, for example, we think about, think of the scholars that have passed this deen along to us, right? And those scholars that passed this deen along, many of them, we don't know much about their mothers. We don't know much about their fathers. We don't know much about their influences. And the love that their mother showed them, who we may not even know, may be the reason they became who they are. But nobody give credit to the mom. Nobody knows much details about the mom unless he talked about his mom or wrote something about her. We don't know. But that woman who the world doesn't know, and her son or her daughter everybody knows, that woman is reaping so much from the ummah because of what she did. You understand? There are people on the scene and there are people behind the scenes. There are people that are prominent and people that are invisible. On the Day of Judgment, you'll see that this is why Allah calls it like a lahwun wa la'ib. It's like a game and a play. And even the idea of la'ib, some say, is playing along. Like somebody looks like a king, somebody looks like a beggar, but on Judgment Day, the beggar looks like a king and the king looks like a beggar. Things are going to flip. So whoever may have done even the worth of a flying piece of dirt, a speck flying in the air, something weightless in this world, even the worth of that they will see. And the other implication of that, of course, is even if in the spiritual sense it was worth so little, like we prayed but our mind was somewhere else, we made mistakes in our prayer, our wudu was faulty or whatever else, it was some, like 99% the salah was horrible. That 1% of good that was in it, Allah will count that too. He'll give that to you. You know? This is why at the end of our prayer we say, Rabbana taqabbal minna. Master, accept from us. Okay, it was broken, it was flawed, it was a lot of problems in it, but whatever patch job we gave you, just take it from us. You know, you'll accept it from us. That's the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam passed on to us. And for us it's a lot more valid, you know, because he built the Kaaba and made that dua. We do what we do and then we make that dua, Allah accept from us, you know. So this is what فَمَن يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ وَمَن يَعْمَلْ. And this, by the way, also by mentioning khair first, I'm emphasizing that for those of you who memorize this surah, always mess up. Is khair first or shar first? Yeah? So now you won't forget. Khair is first. Why? Because Allah Azza wa Jalla is giving you hope. As scary as Judgment Day is, bring your khair, I'll look at that first. Bring your good, I'll look at that first. You know, first impressions change everything. When you go to court or when you go to present your case to a teacher and the first question you got is wrong, in the teacher's mind, it's like, okay, this is going to be a lot of X's on this page. When you start off good, then there's some mistakes here and there, then the teacher even has like a better impression. Okay, not so bad. You know? The idea that Allah wants to actually give you a boost in confidence from the beginning. Let's highlight your good deeds first. فَمَن يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ وَمَن يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا. And whoever may have done a flying speck, is worth of evil, of harm. And khair, by the way, to do something not just good, also means to do something better. To do something better. And shar also doesn't just mean something evil, also means something worse. Meaning you had choices all the time. Should you do the better thing or the worse thing? There's something you can say, there's something better you can say. There's something you can do, there's something better you can do. These choices that you had to make all the time. And when you ended up making harmful choices, shar also means harm. Whoever did an ounce worth of harm. Harm implies harm to yourself, but also means what? Harm to others. Harm to others. And so in using that word, Allah is reminding us of harm caused to others is something that Allah will ask about. وَمَن يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَهُ. He'll absolutely see it. And Allah didn't say He'll judge it or He'll punish it. He's just talking about seeing it. This surah kind of leaves the mystery open-ended. Okay, I see what I did. Now what? There's no now what. The surah ended. There's no answer to that question. And that answer will actually come in Surah Al-Qari'ah. Okay, now that you've seen what you did, and you know that every little thing got counted, let's weigh it all together now. Now that you've seen every single gram and milligram and microscopic subatomic particle gram, now let's put it all together. فَأَمَّا مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ وَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ. Now that picture is going to get completed. And once it's weighed, Of course, once it's weighed, it should be judged. What is it worth? Is it worth Jannah or is it worth Jahannam? And that's what's going to get talked about. But right now, it's just the level of shock of just someone looking at what they've done. Just looking at what they've done. And so as I tie all of this together, I'll share with you that this brief surah of 8 ayat, in my estimation, has essentially 3 parts. And the first part of it is when the earth lets go of its secrets, it unleashes, and human beings are in shock. And correspondingly, at the end of it, human beings are in shock yet again. But this time not over the entire earth, but over every dirt speck, which is, by the way, referring to the earth again, because all of the earth at the end is made up of what? Dirt. Right? But every dirt speck worth of deed is going to be of shock to you. The equivalent of that will be of shock to you. So that's the beginning and the end of this surah. And in the middle of this surah is يَوْمَئِذٍ تُحَدِّثُ أَخْبَارَهَا بِأَنَّ رَبَّكَ أُحَالَهَا يَوْمَئِذٍ يَصْدُرُ النَّاسُ أَشْتَاتًا لِيُرَوْا أَعْمَالَهُم. This is the day on which the earth itself will testify. It will speak. And Allah will have inspired it, and people will be broken up into groups by their deeds, so that they may be shown the deeds that they did. May Allah Azza wa Jal protect us on Judgment Day, and may Allah Azza wa Jal make us of those whose good deeds are heavy, and whose bad deeds are light, and are forgiven. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Hakim, wa nafa'ani wa iyyakum bil ayati wa dhikr al-Hakim.